Hello, Thaddeus. It's not Friday, July 5th, the day after our founding fathers decided that home rule was more important than the BBC. But anyways, what I've decided to do, in honor of America, is to go through every single president and tell you something bad about them so that you know they're all assholes. Here we go. George Washington. Rich, aristocratic prick, slave owner, and the whiskey tax, which unfairly targeted Western farmers. John Adams. The Alien and Sedition Acts. Thomas Jefferson, the embargo laws, Indian removal, and also a slave owner. James Madison, you guessed it, slave owner. There is also the Wilkerson affair, which was keeping officers in the military for political reasons rather than whether or not they were competent, and bowing to pressure to allow settlers to settle on Indian land. James Monroe, the Monroe Doctrine, the Missouri Compromise, the Seminole Wars, and, you guessed it, also a slave owner. John Quincy Adams. While a veritable progressive of his day and one of the most generally qualified presidents we've ever had, there was a fair bit of pork barrel spending in his General Survey Act, and he was pretty bad at politics. Then there's Andrew Jackson, who had the wonderful spoils system, the Trail of Tears, Specia Circular, or however that's pronounced. It has something to do with paying stuff in gold, but it led to the Depression of 1837, also a slave owner. Martin Van Buren, the man with the chops, and also our first combo breaker. He was the first non-English Irish president. Oh, and also, English wasn't his first language. He's the only president to have that. And another high point of his career, he didn't want Texas to be part of the Union. It's really hard to hate him for that one. He did continue the program of Indian removal, and despite his own dismal view on slavery, saw it as his constitutional duty to protect it. Then there's William Henry Harrison, everyone's favorite president. It's March, it's cold, it's raining, and you're giving a 2-hour speech. Wear a coat. And people say, this guy is our stupidest president. Then we got John Tyler. As Jonathan Colton says, he annexed Texas from Mexico. That alone would really be enough for me. But also he was a Confederate sympathizer and owned slaves. James K. Polk has the earliest surviving photograph of any president, but he was a slaveholder who extended the Missouri Compromise. Oh, and there's also this thing where after he didn't successfully negotiate buying lands from Mexico, he placed troops around the border and around the country in order to try to bully Mexico into giving us the land he wanted. And then when they refused, he used it as a cause belli for a war against Mexico. Zachary Taylor, slave owner, and then there was the Compromise of 1850, which strengthened the Fugitive Slave Act. And then there was Millard Fillmore, our most duck-named president. He put Brigham Young in charge of Utah, and he actually signed the Fugitive Aid Act of 1850. Franklin Pierce attempted to justify war against Spain in order to annex Cuba. He repealed the Missouri Compromise and replaced it with the Kansas-Nebraska Act. Also, Confederate sympathizer. He was so bad at his job, he was the first president to hire a full-time bodyguard. James Buchanan peddled this line of shit. He claimed that slaves were treated with kindness and humanity. Both the philanthropy and the self-interest of the master have combined to produce this humane result. Excuse me a second. He also vetoed a bill to establish more colleges because he thought there was already too many educated people. He poorly managed the Panic of 1857, ignoring advice. He failed to deal with the succession crisis and establish federal garrisons in states likely to succeed, and then he really screwed the pooch with Fort Sumter. Now, for the man with the top hat and the kick-ass beard, Abraham Lincoln. Well, he suspended habeas corpus. Oh, and then there was that draft thing where wealthy citizens could buy their way out of it, putting an undue burden on the poor. Oh, and one more thing. He wasn't badass enough to shoot laser beams from his eyes.
They will see you in the future.